Hey friends, welcome or welcome back. My name is Shannon, and today we are going to talk about 5 of my favorite classics that are not Jane Austen. I know, you must be shocked. I've been talking about Jane Austen so much lately, you must think that she is the only classic author that I enjoy. She is my favorite, and she's the one I have reread the most. However, I do have other favorite classic authors, and I'm going to go over 5 of the classics that I've reread the most over the years. So if you are interested in classics but are not really thrilled with Jane Austen, and that's okay, you don't have to be. Hopefully, I can give you some ideas of some books to check out. The first classic that I've read many times would be Little Women by Louisa May Alcott. This is the story of 4 young girls, Meg, Jo, Beth, and Amy, and how they navigate life through the times of the Civil War. Now, Louisa May Alcott wrote this Little Women as the one novel. However, the Little Women that we know today is actually combined with the second book that she wrote to continue the story of the sisters, which would be Good Wives. The editions of Little Women you get nowadays actually combines Little Women and Good Wives, but they were written separately. Little Women was written first, and it really only covers their childhood. It doesn't actually cover them falling in love. That's where Good Wives comes in. And I've reread Little Women so many times since I was a young girl to today. And it is just heartwarming and inspiring and not stressful. So when I need something comforting, I usually go to Little Women. This is one of my comfort reads. The next classic that I've reread the most would be Anne of Green Gables by L.M. Montgomery. Now, this would be the entire series, not just this first book, Anne of Green Gables. I adore this entire series. Like Little Women, it is my comfort read. And when I want to feel happy and comforted and not stressed out, and I just want to quiet my mind, I really do turn to Anne. I can't recommend these books enough. It starts with Anne of Green Gables, and it's a series of 8 books. We start out with Anne, 13 years old, who is an orphan and gets adopted by Matthew and Marilla Cuthbert. And then the books just go through her life until she's an adult and married with her own children. And if you've never read Anne of Green Gables and you love Little Women, I do think you would enjoy L.M. Montgomery's Anne of Green Gables series. Now, taking a slightly darker turn, we move to Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. I have reread this many, many times. I love the Bronte sisters, and Jane Eyre is the one that I've read the most. I have read Anne Bronte's Tenant of Wildfell Hall a couple of times, and I really do enjoy it. It's actually a really great book. And I've also read Wuthering Heights, not my favorite, although I do still believe it is a very important work of literature. So I do continue to read it every now and again, but I just don't enjoy it as much as I enjoy Jane Eyre. I think I enjoy it so much because it is a love story. You have orphaned Jane Eyre, who, mistreated by the family that she lives with when she is young, gets sent away to a school where she is also mistreated, and then she finally becomes an adult and is able to go out on her own, and she becomes a governess at Thornfield Hall, and she meets Mr. Rochester, who becomes her love interest. Dark and mysterious, and Mr. Rochester, who takes her and loves her, but has a very dark secret that she does find out in the book. I have had a little bit of an issue since I reread this the last time. I think it was maybe a year or two ago I reread it, and I found myself thinking on the story a little bit differently than I did when I was younger. I saw Mr. Rochester as very manipulative, something that I had never noticed before. And I found myself a little bit angry at the age difference. I felt like, oh, here we go, just another man in his late 30s preying on an 18-year-old girl. Like, oh, gee, here we go again. I'm sick and tired of this. Older men, preying on young women. I'm tired of it. I know it's more than that. It is so much more than that. And I also have to remember that, this was written a couple hundred years ago, was a little bit different then. Yes, older men did marry much younger women because they needed children. And sorry to say, but younger women are more likely to have children than women my age. So that's just how it was. Like, I do understand that. But I did have a little bit of a problem this latest reading where I was just not happy with Mr. Rochester at all. He is so manipulative. And I do think Charlotte had a thing for manipulative men, because if you read Villette, which I read for the first time this year, Lucy also falls for an extremely manipulative man. I haven't read Charlotte's other books, The Professor and Shirley, but they are on my list. So I'm curious to see how she writes those men in those stories. All my criticisms against Mr. Rochester aside, this really is a wonderful book. And it was revolutionary in the sense that Jane Eyre considers herself an equal to Mr. Rochester, and she stands up for herself, and she does things her own way, and she will not be forced into a situation where she is not comfortable. And Charlotte just shows this beautifully in this book. Next, we have North and South by Elizabeth Gaskell. Elizabeth Gaskell was a friend of Charlotte Bronte's and actually wrote the first biography about Charlotte Bronte. Now, Elizabeth Gaskell was a great writer in her own right, and North and South is one of my favorite books of hers. I also have read Wives and Daughters, and I do have Cranford on my shelf, but I haven't read that yet. And I'm hoping to read through all of Gaskell's canon, but North and South is by far my favorite. And if you haven't read it, it's kind of a Pride and Prejudice fanfic, because you've got two people, one wealthy, one not so, and the both prideful and prejudiced natures of the two of them. It's the typical enemies to lovers trope. Okay, Jane Austen essentially pioneered the enemies to lovers trope in Pride and Prejudice. Elizabeth Gaskell took on the torch and did it here in North and South as well. And this is set in the north of England during the Industrial Revolution. And Gaskell was very adamant in showing the inequities of these factories and how they treated their workers and the conditions that they worked under. But here she also has a love story. So we've got Margaret Hale, who is from the South, who is from a clergyman's family, moves up north to the town of Milton with her family, and she is very sympathetic to the workers and gains the ire of John Thornton, who is a owner of one of the factories in Milton, and they are constantly butting heads and then fall in love with each other. And the story is about how they can come to terms with the other person's point of view on something as important as the working class of the north of England at this time. Really great book, and highly recommend it. So you're probably thinking, those are a lot of female authors. You've got Louisa May Alcott, who is an American female author. You've got Ellen Montgomery, who is a Canadian female author. Then Charlotte Bronte and Elizabeth Gaskell, both British female authors. But don't worry, I do have a boy. And that would be The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexander Dumas. I love this book, and it is thick. And I have reread this many, many times. It is such a good read, and don't actually be worried about the length, because it goes quickly. And the reason it goes quickly is because Alexander Dumas wrote this as a like a newspaper serial. So there's always a cliffhanger. Every chapter is a cliffhanger. So I I recommend not reading this while you're trying to go to bed, because you'll stay up and it'll be 2 o'clock in the morning before you know it, and you've gotten no sleep, and then you have to get up for work and you're tired and you're cranky. So try not to read it before bed, because you will just not want to stop. And this tells the story of Edmond Dantes, who is wrongly convicted of a crime. He's sent away to prison, where everybody thinks he just dies there. He ends up escaping and then wreaking revenge on everybody who had a hand in putting him in prison. And I think he was in prison for like 17 years or something like that. So he had a lot of time to think about his revenge. So, Count of Monte Cristo by Alexander Dumas, the one boy in my in my 5 favorite classics. And then, as an honorable mention, I am going to throw in Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. And I don't think I really need to introduce Rebecca. Everybody knows about Rebecca. And this is about a young girl who meets an older man, of course, who is a widow, who owns the estate of Manderley. And she meets him. He asks her to marry him. He takes her back to Manderley. And then mysterious things start happening. And it's just a great Gothic, mysterious book, and one of my favorite rereads. Honorable mention. Yes, another female writer. I'm sorry. So I hope that gives you some ideas of some classics that are not Jane Austen to put on your list to check out. I do enjoy rereading these books, and some of them I revisit regularly every year, some of them every couple of years, but I do hope you have gotten some inspiration from this. That is all I have for you today. Thank you so much for joining, and have a great day. Bye.